Hello everyone, welcome to another heart-pounding edition of ARG Presents. I am Amigo Aaron, joined as always by a man who's as enlightening as he is frightening, Brent.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Brent, how you doing this week?
I am doing well.
Very good, very good. So, if you joined us last week, the wheel was spun and the deal was made, and this week we'll be looking at games on the Sega CD / Mega CD. Brent, what do you think about the Sega CD / Mega CD?
Well, I don't think it was a good idea at the time, but it could have been good. Unfortunately, it failed, in my opinion. Just the Master System, or the Genesis that was attached to, was not powerful enough to take real advantage of the extra storage capacity.
Well, I'm going to say that it was a pretty decent idea, and I'll tell you why. We were in between generations there. They saw the hole in the marketplace for a cheap medium, and they also saw a place where you could use that extra storage, and they went with it. I think what failed them was the overall use of it. It was a new storage type, and I think it caught a little people off guard as to what to do with it. Sort of like laser discs were back in the arcade days. They had them, the technology was there. They weren't quite sure what to do with the technology.
Right.
So let's have a quick look at the Mega CD. I'm going to call it that henceforth, but over here it's called the Sega CD. So this was actually the second CD peripheral released for a home console. Do you want to take a guess at the first?
I do not know the first.
The first was the TurboGrafx 16. They had a CD peripheral for theirs. Of course, the disk capacity on these was about 650 meg, which is standard. But normally, I think due to formatting, it was about 500 meg, which is 320 times more than most Genesis cartridges.
Yes. Yep.
Unfortunately, the average size of the games on these CDs was somewhere much, much lower, probably between 13 and 50 meg of space used on the disc. So most of the disc was used for audio, that sort of thing.
Well, like you said, it was such a new concept to have all this space.
Right. The one thing that this did that very few people took advantage of was it had CD-ROM and it played CD plus G. Which was it would play the music discs that had the CD. Remember the music discs? They had very few of them were available. I thought that was kind of wacky. My buddy had a bunch of these discs, and we'd always fire them up to watch what was going on. I believe, like for example, Information Society was a band that took advantage of it. If you remember them,
I do not.
That made me feel old. So this thing released in the U.S. Way back in 19. Let me find the exact. I've got Japan 91, U.S. 1992, 11. So November. It released about a year earlier in Japan, and in the U.K. it came out in April of 93. So they had a little bit.
Wow. That's kind of crazy.
Now this debuted in America at a price tag of 300 U.S. buckaroo-doos, and now in today's wad, you'd be paying the big money, $536.
Yeah,
for that. So that, but I mean,
insanity.
Well, it was a Cadillac style peripheral. I mean, it was supposed to be it was going to be a big deal. So when you bought the Sega CD / Mega CD, you got not just a CD, you also got added hardware.
Oh, yeah. So
what did you get? Well, you have another 68,000 processor, which is the same thing that powers the Genesis.
Yep.
Clocked at 12.5 megahertz, and you also got 10 channels of sound that would come with it. 10! I couldn't believe that. I had to check to make sure I wasn't insane. The CD would stream audio, like we mentioned earlier. It also had special hardware in it for video scaling that added to whatever the Genesis came with out of the box. You want to take a guess how many of these are sold, just for fun? This is worldwide.
Worldwide. I'll say 1 million.
No. 2.24 million worldwide. So it's not too bad. I mean, it's not for a peripheral. That's pretty good.
For an add-on for a system that was already pretty much to its prime. On the downslope of its prime.
It also added an additional 64K of memory. again, I'm not sure. I don't know if that was strictly for the scaling or for the I/O of the drive or whatever. So it had a decent amount of power that came in it. Now, if you had a Sega Genesis or Megadrive Model 1, this thing would hook from the side and sort of sit on it.
Kind of docked, yeah.
Yeah. And if you had a Model 2, it's set in a different way. The Model 1, the original Sega CD had a powered tray that would come out, which was cool, but those are known today as the least reliable ones, just because if you have any PC experience or any experience with an old console that has those powered trays, it's the first thing to go is that powered tray.
The belt's in it.
Yeah.
The belt and the gears, chip teeth.
But that might say it's much cooler looking. It is. You don't deny that.
I mean, okay.
I'm just saying, it looks cooler than the other one. The other one sort of attaches to the side, and it's just the way you push down on it, and it pops open. It's manual. These things, of course, in the true Sega tradition, had big honking power supply that you had to plug in. In addition to the whatever honking power supply you had hooked up to begin with, and of course, also in the Sega tradition, you had to have a bunch of crazy adapter plugs or like brackets to keep everything put. Like if you have a Model 1, it'll hang off the sides. They made a whole like faux piece of Genesis that would stick on the end to make it look like your Genesis was long enough to not have that additional space. I mean, when you've got it all constructed, it looks good. There's never a reason to not have it on, and you can just leave it on. So they made some additional versions of the Sega CD. A couple that I wanted to touch on one was they licensed the tech to Jvc. Now, it was called the Jvc X-Eye. The X-Eye was a very goofy, but I mean it worked. It had one thing it had in Japan that Jvc had had like a karaoke function in it, which now it got stripped out in the American version, but it's an all-in-one unit that it's about as long. It's about the same size. I'm trying to think what I could compare it to. Maybe it's not quite as long as like a Sega CD with the sidecar version. It's more flattering looking unit. I've seen one. I came an ace of purchasing one, and I didn't do it. But a couple years ago, in fact, I'm pretty sure I complained about it on on Amigos because they would never lower the price, and now I looked at the price and it's through the roof. The other item I want to talk about was a little item called the CDX. Have you ever seen a CDX?
CDX. That's what the 32 and
no. This is a CD. This is a Sega CD, and it just is smashed into a little like a rectangular box. It looks like it's a portable CD player with that sticker with a cartridge slot on the back where you can put the cartridge.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And these are these things are pretty sought after. I looked at both these on eBay just to see what they were going for these days, and both these things are going around $300 plus, and there are people asking far more. And I'll tell you, they're going for that. That's not what they're wanting. That's what they're going for. So the days of picking up a cheap Sega CD peripheral is over. And I'll tell you, I thought just for the show, I might pick one of these up. I've been meaning to pick one up for a while because I don't have a Sega CD, as you can tell. And they have skyrocketed. Model 1s that are tested and working are going for about $240, and the Model 2s are going for about over $100. These things are known to fail quite a bit, so normally things you're going to have recapped and have belts put in them and whatnot. And so even used ones are going for a lot more money than they used to. It was quite astounding to me that the price had went up that high. So there were 210 titles officially released, the best as far as I could tell.
Which is a decent-sized library, especially for an add-on.
Yeah, 57 were released only in Japan. All right.
Which makes sense because they had an extra year on everybody.
All right, 39 were released only in North America, and the Europeans got 5 exclusive, so not that great. Well, you want to take a guess at what the high? Now I looked, and this is what I found over and over, but I don't have anything to back these figures up. But from what I can tell, what do you think the best-selling Sega CD title was?
The Sonic game.
That's the one I came up with was Sonic. According to the stats I found, they allegedly sold 1.5 million copies of Sonic CDs.
So 3/4 of everyone who owned the unit owned the game.
Absolutely. The distant second, and I mean way distant, as far as I could tell, was Shining Force CD.
Due to a large Japanese backing, I'm assuming.
One would assume. So the Megadrive CD, though, I mean, overall, I think it's a decent unit. I'm not as down on it as you are, per se, but it's a curiosity now to add functionality to a console like that. I mean, really, I'm trying to think when the last time you really saw that.
It's been a long time.
Because I mean, now it's pretty much all software. No one's trying. People are updating desktops and stuff of their console, but they're not actually updating the actual. I guess the one that comes to mind would be the Xbox 360 with the HD drive, and to compensate for the PlayStation's Blu-ray, of course.
And that was a horrible idea that flopped terribly.
That was a stratagem to get HD DVDs over.
Well, yeah, it was. Yeah, that had absolutely nothing to do with gameplay at all. So.
Yeah, a few other combos that got released. This is Sega would license their hardware, and so they not only did JVC get the X-Eye, Pioneer had something called the Laser Active, and there was something called the Iowa Mega CD, and there's the Sega Multi Mega as well. So you've got they license some stuff out. Now I know there's like a VCR or DVD weird thing that has the technology baked into it. I've seen that on some shows on the net. So they would license this out, I don't think, to any effectiveness. Sort of like the 3DO was their plan as well, to license out their tech, and it went just about as well as the Sega's did. So with all that in mind, we picked 2 titles from the Mega CD, and I think this week, Brent, we'll let you kick it off with your title. What do you got?
Well, let me tell you something. What can be said about Battlecorps that hasn't already been said? Absolutely everything. Because this game has been dropped off the face of the earth. Created by Core Design, most famous for the Tomb Raider series. Also, they made Bonk. I mean, they have tons of games.
If you were an Amiga fan, you'll recognize Core Design as for their long run on the Amiga. They did a lot of good titles on there.
So when you hear a name like Core Design, you think, man, this it has to at least be something. But there is almost no information. This was a game that was created. It did not do well in the marketplace, and then it just fell off the planet. The way the game plays is you are a mercenary group of sorts who is tasked with going to a mining planet where an evil AI uploaded by an evil mining corporation,
they're all evil,
has taken over the mining colony, and you have to go in there and stop it. So the big baddie at the end of this is named Moses.
Yeah, cool name.
Moses, the multi-cameral, organic, synergistic, energized system.
Rolls off the tongue.
Oh my God.
That's why they call him Moses, right there.
And you know what you're driving?
You're driving, what is that thing?
BAM!
Yeah, oh yeah, BAM. B-A-M.
The bipedal attack machine.
That sucks.
Was this a thing back in the early 90s that I missed? You just put some letters together and then make an anagram out of it?
That's exactly, I mean, it's a military thing, right?
Holy moly.
I mean, what would you rather them call, like, urban attack, urban attack mech? So that's lame. They got a BAM is much more catchy.
So when the game loads up and you get the one of the worst voice-over narrations of all time.
Almost inaudible.
For a CD system. Now, I played this wearing headphones, and I could at least understand what he was saying. But they tried to make this gravelly, hardened military voice, and it just failed.
This reminds me of the classic faux pas that these places do, where they're like, we're not going to hire a voice actor. We'll just put some effects on Joe. Get in here, Joe. Joe's like, okay. You know, and he comes in and records it, and then they affect them so much. You're like, what the hell's Joe saying? Who knows?
Yeah.
Ship it.
So, after the intro that explains everything that I just explained, sorta, a lot of it you have to go and do your own research on. Of course, the cutscenes for this are computer CGI at the time, rendered in the Sega CD video quality, which makes it a pixelated, horrible mess.
It's not attractive, the opening movie.
It is really not. So then you go to your startup screen, which is straight out of an Amiga game. The two options are basically start game and options, but the background is that gray wall background with two lights on either side of your choice that move up and down when you choose.
It's basic.
Which, yeah, it seems so out of place with the rest of the game. It really does. You hit start, you go into the game, and you are in the battle room where you can hear your briefings from the Gravel Man, or you can choose one of three. They're not really pilots because you download them into the mech, but they are pilots because they are tied to the mech. Very Pacific Rim-ish, to be completely honest.
Well, it predated that by a few decades.
Yes, it did.
I will say that the choice of pilots at the beginning, I watched some people try to review this, and they were always confused as to why their new pilot didn't have a different mech. Well, that's because there's just one mech.
Yeah, there's one mech, and there's one mech type, you should say, and then the pilot downloads into it.
It's interesting. That's not that bad.
And of course, the pilots. You've got your fast pilot, you've got your armored pilot, and then you've got your all around pilot. In gameplay, makes little to no difference. I tried testing the speed guy, or the speed girl, I should say, versus the armored guy, and I could not tell a speed difference, and I couldn't tell an armor difference. So either the numbers are so similar as to not lose balance, or there isn't a difference at all. I couldn't tell. So you go into your briefing, and you are instantly berated by your commander about how bad you suck before you've even done anything.
It makes you wonder why they're giving you this incredibly dangerous and important mission. You think you want to lift the guy up,
Instant hate. So, and then you pick your pilot, and you go into the game, and the game is a Wolfenstein / Doom-esque 3D world where it's all sprite based, but the sprites, enlarge and shrink.
They scale.
Right. And they have that turning effect whenever you're walking around them. It's actually done, in my opinion, pretty well. The way that they were able to do this, because this is not something that you can normally have on a Genesis, even with the CD peripheral, because it's just too much. They cleverly disguise half the screen as your HUD. And in fact, that's
a Sega CD tradition.
In fact, it's over half. It's well over half.
Oh yeah.
So all it has to render is, 1/3, maybe 2/5 of the screen, for the actual graphics. The gameplay is slow. I think this is why people don't like this game, because this game got universally panned on the few reviews I could actually find of it. You're in a mech, and you have to play the game like you're a slow, lumbering tank. If you crank the speed up to 11 and just try to bum rush everything, you will get shot. The draw distance isn't far enough for you to set back and pick off sniper style, so you have to move, but you cannot just bully through. The selection of weapons is actually really deep. You've got your machine guns, you've got your cannonballs, for lack of a better term. You've got your pulse rifle, which is as fast as a machine gun, just does more damage. Missiles, which is by far the most useful weapon.
I guess they're enemy detecting
yes.
missiles. Because if it was heat, you'd be in trouble. You're in lava some of the time.
And then a flamethrower. So great selection of weapons.
And you've got that triple cannonball special.
Yes, and that actually uses 3 cannonballs. The gameplay, I think, a lot of fun. If you go in with the mindset of, I have to methodically get through this level for the most part, I had a great time with it. The speed control, up and down, you adjust your speeds. You hold down C to adjust your aim height up and down, which is something that games like this never had, because in games like Wolfenstein, everything was on the same plane. Games like Doom, it auto up and down, so you didn't have to aim because everything was essentially on the same plane for stuff like Doom. I was able to get about a third of the way through the game. And had a lot of fun. Every time you die, you actually lose that pilot. So essentially, you have 3 lives.
There is some strategy as to which pilot you put out there on some of these missions, because if they get killed, it can be real damaging.
Well, I don't feel that way because I don't think the stats do enough to make a difference. You always get a reload of weapons and all your shields back at the end of each level. In the first level, there are recharge points where you cross over a line. If you stop there for a second, it actually builds your shields back up. Really, really useful for an opening level where you're still trying to get your feet under you. But the game is not forthcoming about telling you about this. It has a scrolling text at the top that tells you whenever there's mines close by, that sort of thing. And it will say, replenish station or recovery station, I think is what it was. But if you don't see that, the only way you know it on the ground is a small strip of pixelated goodness that you can walk right over and never even notice.
It's like a little pixelated, what would you call that? Like a, I don't know, orb or thing? Or I know what
you're talking about. It's just a strip. It's
I walked over a mine or two.
Yeah.
100.
Some of the detail in the game, though, like it has your guns overheating. If you just hold the button down and go ham, you'll eventually overheat your guns.
And it's environmentally sensitive depending on what section you're in. If you're in a hotter section, they overheat quicker.
And it is the second stage is more of a maze. The third stage is like an open maze. That's less maze, more get from point A from point B in a large room. Here's something that will make your day a lot better if you're playing this at home. There is a secret code that once inputted gives you a mini-map.
Oh.
Why was this not a feature on the actual game?
I wish I came across that.
It's an always on screen. It takes up about, 5% of your viewable, which is already small, so it does make this smaller. But it helps tremendously from getting turned around. There's also a stage select code if you go into practice mode, so you can play around on any of the stages. I really like this game. I understand why it's not popular, because it's not pretty. It's not ugly. It certainly isn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's not pretty. The soundtrack is good, but it's a CD soundtrack, so I don't really judge it on that. The voices are horrible. The controls are okay. If this was done on a computer or something that had more buttons or even better located buttons, or essentially what it really needs is an analog stick to allow you to look up and down, that would make all the difference in the world, because in the later levels you have to aim at stuff on the ceiling, and doing that is a pain in the butt. It is a pain in the butt when all this action is taking place, to aim up and down. Overall, though, I would give this a B- on an A to F scale. I will probably go back and play this again. I've heard that the final boss is ridiculously unfair, and I can see that the ramp up in difficulty is already huge just from what I've played. But I really enjoy this game, and I encourage people to go out, give this a look. It doesn't make sense to me why it's not even hated, it's gone.
How did you even come across this thing?
I looked at a list for Sega CD exclusives, and this was a game that was never released on any other system, on any other version. And I thought, I wonder why. Is it that bad, or is it just that forgotten? And it's not that bad. It is just a forgotten game from a good developer that deserves a look.
If I may retort a bit on some of the things, I don't hate everything you said, but this game, you can see why it failed. It's as apparent. The second you fire it up, I could see, okay, this is not going to go. Not just the fact that the entry is off-putting, the opening story is confusing and off-putting and sort of stupid. And the way you're treated as you pick characters, it's just all in that like smart alecky military jerk style, and couple that with the idiotic voice. It was very off-putting. Even the load screens and stuff are ugly. Like you said, the menus aren't attractive.
Sure, I agree with all of that.
But when you go down to it, this is a game that tries to please two masters. It tries to have some of the depth of say like a Mech Warrior 2 on the PC or a Heavy Gear.
Sure.
But it tries to maintain its console roots. And so what you come up with when you do that is this game. A not very deep game that does some of the stuff from both sides, but doesn't really do anything tremendously. This game has, in some ways, it's a technological achievement, but in a lot of ways, it was unfortunately the tech wasn't there to make it happen. My main concern with this game is the draw distance.
It's short.
It's horrible.
It's short.
And so, like, even in the practice stage, I knew right away. I was like, oh boy, because you're tasked with shooting towers in the practice stage, and these are towers, y'all. They're not freaking. They're not little things. They're large, like lighthouses, and you can't see them until you're right up on them. And you could look straight into the distance and not see a tower until you take 2 steps and suddenly it just appears. Bam! It's a huge tower.
Yeah, it's pop in. But I mean,
when you could be getting shot by these things that are, they
can't shoot you if you can't see them.
Their bullets can once you leave the field of view, whatever they've shot still comes at you.
That's correct.
That's a problem because you can't see what's shooting you sometimes. The up and down controls are tough.
They are.
Brent mentioned this, and he's right. This game needs analog controls, and I believe there are probably analog solutions that are out there for the Genesis now, like from homebrew guys and stuff. But I mean, if you want pinpoint accuracy, this is not the game for you. If you think of your reticle in the middle of the screen, if you tap your joystick once, it goes this far.
Yeah,
right? But what if you need it here?
Yeah.
Well, you got problems. This is what you got. You better hope whatever you shoot's going to take out what's between here and here. So that's a huge problem. Is the draw distance and the actual control. There were things I didn't hate. I like the way the mech moves is fine.
Oh, it was very lumbering.
The speed control was, if you come from the PC, there's no problem there. It's just like a gear shift forward or back.
Yeah.
You know, there's no in between, and you can set how fast you're going to go. The game has the levels I played have artificial walls effectively, and what that means is environmental walls. If you go out there, you just die. So the play surface where you actually are running your mech runs, not at least the levels I played, wasn't huge. Now
I disagree there.
I didn't think it was big enough.
I think the levels they're not sandbox. They're not open where you can go anywhere you want. They're sort of on rails. But the levels have a good sense of distance.
It looks bigger than it is.
Certainly.
The graphics, like I said, are muddy, and to be polite.
Yes.
The heads-up, I don't mind a big heads-up display in a mech game because you sort of need a lot of stuff.
You need that radar.
But the heads-up stinks. And I don't mean because it's too big. I mean because like that in the middle of the screen. There's a big like circle that's supposed to give like a radar that tells you where the bogeys are. That thing stinks.
I think it's fine.
It's not nearly. You have to be right up on guys to even see what's going on. I didn't like it. There's a muddy square in the. I don't know what the hell that was. I think it was sort of an overview. I don't know what it was. It was horrible. It was hard to determine how much energy I had left. I didn't like the way they had that gauged on the side. I couldn't tell if my mech took damage in parts or overall. I don't think it was individual damage.
No,
I couldn't find
any.
Which is unusual if you come from Mech Warrior. This isn't a game I would recommend. To be honest with you, I thought it was. I will admit there were things I did like. I like the soundtrack. I like the weapon selection. And I'm not going to sit here and say I didn't have a certain amount of fun. But I mean, if a certain amount of fun, you can just go play a better mech game.
Well,
and this is not what I would call it even a second-rate mech game. I'd say we're in the third rate. And I think Core, because I know Core Design is a tremendous developer.
Yes.
I think they were hamstrung by limitations of the hardware. Maybe this was a title that was a little too grandiose to try on the Sega CD that early on. And it just, for me, it didn't work. I could see why this is falling off the map.
My last rebuttal to this: is this a great game? No. Is this a good game? Not really. I would say this is an average game for the platform it's on.
I'll give you that.
It is a lot better than a lot of the
was
FMVs.
Bubsy an average game for the platform it was on? No. We're going to play that game?
But I think that Battlecorps, I think it is a strong enough license that it could have gotten a sequel on a more powerful system, a Saturn or a PlayStation, where they could have more properly done what they were trying to do. And I don't feel like this should have been a forgotten property. I think the pacing of play, as long as you don't just try to bully through, is fun. It makes you feel like you're in a big lumbering mech. I liked it. I think it's worth looking at. If you are going to go on eBay and look for this thing, it is all over the map.
Really? The prices vary, do
for
they?
as high as $60 and as low as $6.
I'd go for the $6 version.
Pretty much. From the completed auction history, anytime this game is put up for any price, it seems to be purchased. The exceptions are if it is not complete in box, it does not sell. If it's just the disc, it's not going to sell. Someone was trying to sell just the instruction booklet. It didn't sell. Everything else involving this game, whether it was in bundles, individuals, sold. So I think that there is a market for it. Would I pay $60 for it? Absolutely not. Would I pay $5 for it if I had a Sega CD? Absolutely. I think it's good enough to get.
I'll give you that.
All right.
So now let's get to the main event.
Oh my gosh.
We've waddled through the preliminaries. Let's get to the main event of the evening. I picked this week as my game. This is a no-brainer. The second that wheel finished spinning, I was like, bam! I'm on it. I don't mean a crappy second-rate mech. I mean, bam! It's time. And so we're going to talk about Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side. I love it. Just the name is awesome. So before we talk about Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side, let's go into the original Eternal Champions just a little bit, so in case people aren't familiar. So if you live under a rock, because you got to not know about Eternal Champions, it was a fighting game released for the Sega Genesis / Megadrive in 1993. So if you'll recall, step back, if you will, to the early 90s.
All right.
Fighting games were all the rage.
Yes.
In fact, fighting games had saved the arcade.
Yes.
I remember going to the arcade. It was a downtime. And then a little game called Street Fighter 2 stepped up, and the arcades blew up big time. They saved the arcades. They prolonged the life of the arcades for a good while. And if you played Street Fighter 2 back in the day, you'll recall it. I mean, what a game that was. It came out of nowhere. Beautiful art. Great
Big
balance,
sprites.
great crazy characters, that were a lot of fun to play.
Memorable characters,
great
too.
music, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And so, Street Fighter II set the standard for pretty much every game that was in the fighting genre ever since.
Every 2D game, yes.
And many have stepped up to the plate, and many have come and gone. Some are still around, some aren't. So, when you have Street Fighter II, you must talk about its antithesis, its nemesis, its arch rival, which was the Mortal Kombat series. Mortal Kombat came out. I'll never forget when I saw Mortal Kombat for the first time. I just couldn't believe that much wholesale violence was being portrayed on the arcade. I swear to you, it seems silly now, but when they were knocking guys' heads off, so I felt like I was watching something illegal. I was like, holy cow. I mean, it seems so stupid to say that, but I swear to you, I felt dirty watching that Mortal Kombat. But I was a big fan of like the Shaw Brothers and that old Hong Kong chop suey cinema that came from back in the day. And so this appealed to me instantly. I love the sort of cheesy backdrops and the
monks
and the masters and all the guys clapping. I thought it was great. So you've got the big dogs, right? And they would remain the big dogs for a while with these. Excuse me. So when you've got these two juggernauts, you had a lot of people step up to try to play with them in the arcades. But what separates Eternal Champions from these games is the fact that it did not have...
It didn't have a sneeze in it at all.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Sorry. It did not have an arcade release. This was a game, one of the few games at the time, that was made solely for a console, bypassing the arcade entirely. Because you had plenty of Art of Fightings and Samurai Showdowns, World Heroes, a lot of Neo Geo properties that stepped up, and Fighters Histories, all of which I like almost all those, by the way. But this one went right to the console, developed for Sega, and was a pretty big hit when it came out in '93. My friends had a couple copies of it we would play, and what turned me on about it was an interesting combination of beautiful art and beautiful graphics, super unique characters.
Yes.
I mean, there's no denying that. And what made it extra special to me was they all had a story, a very interesting backstory, and they all had a martial arts choice that was a real life martial art.
That was actually displayed in the sprites.
That's right. They actually did some of their martial arts. Like some people did capoeira, jeet kune do, and all that sort of thing. So I was a big fan of Eternal Champions when it came out. Now go ahead.
We're talking about the original, right?
Right, the original.
Hated it. Absolutely hated it. Choppy. It was too much for the system.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
Holy moly, I hated the first
I liked the first game. I thought that it played pretty well, and it was beautiful. And it was one of the first Genesis games that took it. It was I think as we recall, it was at the time it was the biggest Genesis game ever released. It was beautifully rendered. The backgrounds were very good. The music was great.
Yep.
The characters all had like the backstory, and they had a cool. The premise of the first one was the Eternal Champion had come down, and he had found these characters that were pivotal to history, but had been killed. And he at the moment of their death, he yanked them out of their time and brought them together. And the winner of a fight between all of them, a big tournament, would be the one that would get put back in their time stream with the knowledge of what was going to happen, so they could avoid being killed.
Which is an awesome premise.
It
is an awesome premise.
It played differently than the Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat in that there were no like rolling maneuvers. Everything was button. It was a button-based system, so you would have to was button combinations with the joystick, not like in Street Fighter forward and backward rolls and 360s. That stuff
circles.
Wasn't used. Now, the result of this was that this game was not one you could. One thing the other fighting games had in common was that you could sort of pick them up because a lot of them used the same sort of similar maneuverings.
There was usually at least one character in every fighting game that you could eventually figure out their moves just by trying moves that you've done in the past.
Absolutely. And so, but this one didn't. This is a tougher game to pick up. This required you to go and study hard to play these characters. This thing had a momentum bar with a little yin-yang symbol in the corner, and to get your special moves off, you had to build your momentum in this thing to build up the ability to use special moves.
And this is still the first one.
This is still the first one. So there's a lot of similarities. That's why I'm going into it. So one thing you could do is, of course, just beating the hell out of the guy would be something, but you could also taunt him with a button combination. They would say, like, usually like a one-word taunt, like wimp, or something like that. And then as you built this up, you unleash nastier fighting moves. The game also had deaths, which I believe in the first game were just called like overkills. And they were all based on where you fell when you died
in the stage.
Right, on the stage. So like if you were, for example, there's a stage with a huge rotating fan, like an exhaust fan.
Yeah.
And if you get killed right at the right point, your guy would careen into the fan and get cut up.
Yes.
So you got a little taste of Mortal Kombat in there. Now, that's not to say that original Eternal Champions was without flaw, because it did have flaws, and some of which even carried over to the newer one. Eternal Champions is not the kind of game you want to play alone, because the computer...
Well, in the first one, the computer outright cheats.
He does. The computer can pull off its moves without worrying about that charge meter. But that's really irrelevant, because they'll have beat your hind well before.
Oh my gosh, difficulty is
the difficulty is too much. It is way too much. They will beat you like a dog. No, it doesn't matter who you play or really how good you are. I've played this game for years, and I don't think I've ever gotten through all the characters to beat the game. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And the Eternal Champion you fight at the end is ultra hard, because
he has all the moves.
He's better than everybody.
Moves. Yeah.
So that was a flaw. Again, like Brent said, some people will comment that maybe it was a little too difficult in terms of the CPU, which I think everyone will argue that. Some people will say that the frame rate's not quite there.
It's not.
I never had any problem with the frame rate.
Oh my gosh.
There you go. But it was, again, a beautiful game. So it did well.
It did well enough, yes. Yeah.
And so when the Sega CD came out, of course, Sega was ready to go with the sequel. And the sequel, which is what we're going to talk about today, Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side. So this came out in America in February of '95 for $50, and it came out in April of '95 in the UK. So about the same time, about the same price. It's £49, a little bit more expensive over there. So and this is a Mega CD title, and if you watch the opening of this, it comes up with this little movie of a boat full of people being eaten by a shark, and it says Deep Waters. Sega, this game was the edgiest game that Sega... I mean, this game is... Eternal Champions, even the killings were not that gruesome. They were sort of funny and sometimes kind of gruesome.
They were campy.
In this game, buddy...
Oh my gosh.
They go crazy bonkers with the killings. They're bloody, gory mall fest of death. And so Sega was like, maybe we'll let our evil arm of our company... produce this one. So they came up with a new name for their adult titles. That was Deep Water.
Deep Water.
And so when you see the opening where these people get killed by this shark and there's blood in the water and his body parts floating,
sinking down,
you're like, holy smokes, what am I looking at here? This is a Sega. So this is not like a whole new reimagining of the original, but what they did do was they took all the stuff that made the original good and made it better, and then they added tons of new stuff to make it awesome, and tons of new characters. The character roster in this is great. I'm going to go over some of the characters just briefly because they're so unique and original and wacky. So you've got a caveman, Slash.
Yeah.
I love that guy. You've got a Xavier Pendragon, who's a alchemist or a wizard, which is awesome. You've got Jetta Max. She's this sort of super quick acrobat. You've got, I love this guy, Larson, who's this sort of kind of like a hard-nosed 1930s detective
guy.
He's got the hat and the trench coat, and he has a grappling hook. Then you've got Shadow Yamamoto. Now, actually, Shadow was the very first character developed for the very first game, and was the only character. Apparently, when they originally made Eternal Champions, they relieved whoever was making it. And some other people took it over and took over all the characters. The only one they kept was this girl, Shadow. Shadow is just like super sexy, like a ninja type.
And the winner of the first game, I believe.
She's awesome. She moves with these flips and stuff. And she's sort of the main character in the game. Like when you see the covers and stuff, she's always well in the middle of the pack, looking awesome. Then you've got Midnight. Midnight's a vampire, the Jeet Kune Do vampire, which I like him. And the second game, he gets the ability to transform into like a dog or a wolf and attack you, which is cool. You got John Blade. He is this like futuristic, like bounty hunter
tech guy.
So he shoots like these blades. He's a real cool looking guy. You've got a guy named Rax. He's Rax is this futuristic kickboxer, which I love it. He's got rockets and crap strapped to him.
Oh, okay, yep. I remember him now.
He's awesome. You've got this, and then you've got some new characters. Ramses the Third, Pharaoh, pretty cool. They've got Riptide, which is a cool character. Riptide's like a chick pirate.
Yep.
Remember her, right?
Yep.
You've got a voodoo priestess named Raven. Yep. Remember Raven? She does voodoo, type stuff. You've also got, now we missed one here, which was Trident, the weird, the guy from Atlantis.
Guy. Yeah.
This guy is, he's a real genre-busting guy. He does some real strange, he does capoeira, and he actually does capoeira, which is cool.
Yeah.
But he also does some real weird misplacement stuff. Like he can turn to water, and when you're fighting him, and you'll go through him.
Yeah.
It's real discombobulating. He's got a bunch of powers with his trident that make you make it so you can't get near him, or make it so all the stuff you shoot at him reflects back at you. Just some strange. His trident can spin real quick, and he can cut you with it like a blade.
A lot of the characters have that kind of displacing feeling where they warp to the other side of the screen.
Yeah.
Or they attack from straight down on your character's head.
Yeah.
So
they've got, and you're right. Like the wizard can just basically switch places with you, teleport. And so what makes this neat is that you can go back, and the opening for this is pretty awesome. I don't know if you watched the CD opening.
Yeah.
It shows all the different characters as they're dying. It shows every one of them, and they're all. What you got to think? This game's got like 20-some characters in it.
Well, it doesn't do the hidden ones,
right? But it's got a ton of characters. So you're getting a ton of backstory in here, and there's a voiceover going on the whole time. The first one had some of this, but the CD thing really brings it out.
They used a pretty good use of the technology with the space.
Right. You've also got, I failed to mention, the cowboy, a new character, Dawson McShane. What a name. They just took a bunch of cowboy names and smashed them together. He's just a cowboy guy that he could throw his hat and do some other cool stuff.
Yeah, you're getting into the hidden characters.
No, you get him to start off with, Dawson. So then there's some hidden characters you unlock after you get so far in the game. And I was telling Brent, some of these guys I've never seen because I never unlocked them. I need to go cheat and get them. Of course, you can also use the Eternal Champion, and there's a new guy in this, the Dark Eternal Champion. He's there just to screw things up, so you're sort of trying to fight him off in this. They added some weird hidden characters. There's Crispy, the chicken.
Yeah.
You can play as Crispy. There's Slither, the snake. I like this guy, Thanatos, the Greek god of death, which is cool.
Grim Reaper guy.
Yeah. There's Hooter.
The owl.
And then there's
the neat thing about him is he starts out on the ground, right?
Right.
But he can, when he jumps and moves up, he can kind of pick where he wants to be on the jumping plane. So you can kind of set it head height.
See, I've got to play him before.
I haven't got to play him, but I've seen him play.
Yeah.
It's the animal. Unfortunately, with the animals, they're a fun gimmick character, but their hitboxes are so small that they're gimmicks.
You've also got Zuni, the circus monkey. These are all now. You got some proper hidden character here.
Right.
Chin Wo, an acupuncturist from China. He's cool, and according to what I found out, he was actually supposed to be in the first one, but they ran out of space. There's a couple of these guys that they ran out of space, and so they didn't make the cut on the first one. You've got Yappy, the Shih Tzu dog.
Yes.
Which is cool. And then my personal favorite, I laughed my butt off when I read this, and
I know who it's going to be.
There's a great if you're into Kim Justice, she does a nice retrospective on Atari Championship. It's the first time I'd ever heard of this guy when I watched this back in the day, and it's the Senator.
Yes,
the Senator is a senator, a Washington D.C. senator, and it was supposed to be, I think, it was a takeoff on like Joe Lieberman. Because he was really against these violent games,
right?
And the Senator has a bunch of cool stuff. He's very amusing. So they took a guy who was against violent video games and put him in the most violent game ever. Which
the best move of the Senator, he throws red tape and you get tangled up in it.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then lastly, you've got Thomas Blast Chavez, a Green Beret soldier from 1955, which is cool. So right away you can tell by that roster. It's a huge, diverse roster. You will not find a more colorful fighting game in terms of different guys on it anywhere. I would say this comes in ahead of World Heroes is pretty colorful, but this I think even trumps it. You've got some crazy characters here.
I agree.
And again, one thing I like is they all have their own fighting style, well, especially the main characters, and they use their fighting style. Now, some of the secondary guys are just basically like reskinned with some additional powers.
Well, I mean, they're not really reskinned though. They're their own.
Well, what I mean is, a lot of they use other guys' moves in tandem with some of the stuff they gave them. So this game, when it came out, was a blowaway title. It was a huge title. It was the only Sega CD title ever released that used 256 color graphics. Did you know that?
No, but they used every one of them too.
Yeah, and this one, if there was any debate about the first one's ability to run smoothly, that is taken away. This thing runs as smooth as silk.
It runs well. Yes.
There's a beautiful level that I love to fight on. It's a Trident's level where you're in front of like Atlantis.
Yes.
And you're in this water, and the effect is really
pretty
sweet.
Good. Yeah.
The parallax and stuff is great.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this game have that the other one didn't, aside from more characters, better graphics, which it has both those. And by the way, keep in mind the original had great graphics. This one's even better.
Yes.
This one has several levels of deaths that you can ring out.
Yes.
You've got the original overkills. Then you've got another level of deaths that you can perform that were stage-based, that you can perform when your opponent is not quite dead.
Right.
So
it's a killer instinct a la Ultra combos. You get their health bar down low enough that it's blinking. It gives you the ability to do the extra deaths. And
then you've got these cinematic. There are really three levels of deaths in this. There are these cinematic. They're called cinematic kills or something like that, where something incredibly crazy happens.
Yeah.
I think my favorite is probably on Jetta's stage, where you're fighting in front of the circus tent, and when you pull it off, and what I like about it is when you finally win the round. When you win a round, your guy basically turns into like this little star and shoots off. That means you're being called back. You won. The loser is boned. And so in the background of this tent, you see, and these backgrounds are lush and there's a lot of stuff going on, but you see these guys shoot something out of a cannon, like a circus cannon, and the character that's defeated is standing there, and all of a sudden a clown car falls on this guy. It lands on him and with a bunch of clowns in it, and the clowns hit the horn on the car, and every time they hit it, blood shoots out the horn from your body.
And they're evil clowns.
Oh, it's so funny. It is. The Senate kills in this are so funny. The Senator has one where he blows up the earth with a nuke.
Yes.
Which is great. There's a ton of these great. I mean, one thing you can't. This is another thing. They did not really rip off like Mortal Kombat or something. These kills are idiotically insane.
Yeah, they're way, way over the top.
And they're super. There's one where you fall into this pit.
Oh, that one takes so long.
And you go through there's these your guy is falling through a pit, then he hits the first wave of like blades, and there's like about 20 blades and saws going on. He goes through that, then he falls into the next level, and there's more of those. So at the end, it's just like a skull. It just lands on the bottom of it.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. It takes like a good minute.
It takes a full minute for the thing, and it's like, oh my gosh.
It's so funny.
And, well, I bet you might have known this if you looked up for it enough. This game also has nudity. Did you know that?
Nudity? No,
yes.
I didn't know that.
For one frame, when you're out in front of the theater, and the drive-by happens, in this one, the ticket booth lady jumps out of the ticket booth
with the gun.
Yeah. as she is jumping out of the ticket booth, there is one frame where her dress is down and exposes one of her breasts.
No, I didn't.
For one frame. Yeah.
That is funny. So, and I love that kill. There are so many.
That's another one that takes forever.
This is one you could just go to like YouTube, even if you never want to play the game, just watch the kills. They're very amusing. But I mean, they're super duper gory. We can agree on that.
Oh yeah, they're
idiotic, but it's so over the top that you're just like, it's so funny. And also this is like Mortal Kombat, so it looks like a human. These are like graphics that are getting mauled, killed.
Well, I mean,
animals kill people. Like
some of the dissolving is pretty gruesome. It's Indiana Jones face melting type of gruesome.
Sometimes like there's one where you get thrown in a giant pot. And I remember that one where you sort of melt. It's gruesome. Don't watch it with your kid around. Even today, I was stunned at how violent they were, and I knew they were pretty violent.
And I think this was a takeaway from when they released Mortal Kombat, and they had the violence in it, and Super Nintendo didn't.
Yeah.
And it was a time when that fight was hot and heavy.
Yes.
And they outsold Nintendo because they had in the violence.
Yeah.
And I think someone up in Sega said, you know what? This is what the audience wants. The audience wants grown up, over the top violence. And I think in a very small part, that pushed Eternal Champions to be even more violent. Because the first Eternal Champion was a violent game.
It wasn't this violent.
But the second one is so much more. Here's a perfect example or equation. It is the way Mortal Kombat. The difference is the way Mortal Kombat was when it first came out, where you're punching people's heads off, to where it is in modern times, where you're doing the X-ray moves with the bone breaking.
Yeah, those are super duper nasty.
That's the acceleration of violence that you have between these two games.
Yeah. So the funny thing about these, we've gone on about it, but they're not easy to get off, and some of them are incredibly rare.
Yes.
It's not like Mortal Kombat where you just whip, wham, bam, Bob's your uncle. These are tough. These are real tough to get off.
In fact, you can't plan for, most of them.
Yeah.
Most of them you can't do anything about, because most fights end in a corner.
Just to tell you how rare these are, overkills, like I said, are just like the original. They're stage fatalities.
Right.
Then you've got the sudden deaths. Sudden death is a fatality that you have to activate when your opponent has 33. They have to be in the right spot on the level, and they have to have 33% health or less. And then you've got the vendetta, right, which is a personal finishing move, which is a button combination. That has to be when a certain condition is met. And you have to do this one. You have to activate this one yourself, and the player has to be 33% low on health. And you have to get to a certain distance. So that's a tough one. And then you've got the Senna kills, which are so unbelievably rare that you may never see one in all the time you play the game. They have to be, the other opponents to be at 33% or less. You have to have your inner strength up to do it. They have to have them stunned in a certain way. They have to do all this stuff just to get those off. But I mean, when you can pull it off, you are rewarded with something that you won't forget. That's for sure.
Well, that's the ones where it actually loads in a cinematic.
Yeah,
and
it
plays.
loads off disc. So this game, like I said, it's not perfect. It's still too hard in single player mode. It's not as hard as the first one. Well, if you put it on the lowest level, it's still really hard.
Even at the lowest level, I struggled.
Yeah.
I mean, one or two wins, and there were some characters. Shadow, if I was up against Shadow, I just quit and restarted the game because I couldn't beat her.
Shadow's real. They're all tough. Let's face facts. And she's super. She was like that in the first game too.
Oh my god.
So this is a game you're going to want to play with someone else.
Yes.
You don't. That's the downfall of this game. It is ridiculous. I don't care how good you are. You have to get really good. The computer is. And there's no time to practice. There's not really a mode that was going to help you.
I looked.
Something we should mention, both games have this in common, is that, of course, the Genesis controller, by default, is a 3-button stick.
Yep.
Of course, they eventually came out with 6-button sticks that would allow you to play this. And it has a button setup just like Street Fighter.
Yeah.
Strong, medium, and fierce punches and kicks. if you have a 3-player stick or 3-button stick, you hit the start button to go from kicks to punch. You could toggle.
Right.
Which that's sort of the way it went back in those days. So this game was pretty well received. It was a much like the first one, sort of a midland hit. It sold pretty well. And the Eternal Champions series was planned as a trilogy.
Yes. Yep.
And so the trilogy was planned out. It did not get released. Now, what happened was Sega of America basically went away at one point when the Sega CD was gone. And of course, to go into what happened with between Sega of America and Sega Japan,
that's a whole episode.
It's insanity that goes on with the 32X and the Saturn and all the missteps that equaled out to why Sega doesn't currently make consoles.
It actually, just real quick, it's unbelievable how Sega of America and Sega of Japan could be on so different pages in the same company.
They're like almost two competing companies.
But yeah, we can't go into that this episode, my goodness.
This game had planned, in fact, there was preliminary work on a third game.
Yep.
In fact, I believe it's on the is it the original Dreamcast box? Somewhere there was
Saturn.
There was a picture that said Eternal Champions 3.
It's on a Saturn.
It even had a name, like a sub name. Well, what happened was Sega of Japan nixed it.
They pulled everything.
Now, have you heard why they did it? I read why, and I wasn't super surprised when I read it.
I thought it was just a casualty of the whole Sega of America thing.
No. Sega of Japan, Mama Sega, was convinced that that Eternal Champions was taking away popularity from the Virtual Fighter series.
Yes.
And I mean, this has been, I've read this a lot. I couldn't believe it at first. I had to get some confirmation. But and for the record, I like the Virtual Fighter series, and Virtual Fighter 2 is one of my favorite games. I love that game in terms of a
arcade
3D fighter, right?
Yeah, not
if you played the Genesis version of Virtual Fighter, which was god awful, Virtual Fighter 2. So they pulled the plug, and Virtual Fighter was never made. Eternal Champions 3. Now there were some spin-off games. Larson had a spin-off game, and Shadow had spin-off games.
And
both were horrible.
Yeah.
Also, there was, Eternal Champions was popular enough to get like a line of cups at 7-Eleven. It had some books that went into the thing. They had comic books.
They were going to do was that the one they were going to do a cartoon or a movie of?
They talked about a cartoon. It's got plenty of background to do any sort of awesome, secondary thing with it, but it just never happened, and it faded away. I can tell you, because I've just, hilariously, if you're wondering what this is going for on eBay, I just bought it, and I was hoping it would get here for the show, but it didn't make it. But I paid $25 for the in-box complete Eternal Champions,
which is a steal for this game. I think it's a steal.
I thought it was a pretty good price. Now I just got to get something to play it in because I don't have a Sega CD. But I wanted to own everything. I'll tell you what got me was, like I said, if you watch Kim Justice does a really in-depth documentary on the Eternal Champion series, and man, by the time it was over, I was already on eBay grabbing that sucker. I was like, gotta have it. It's a good game. Like I said, if you could pick it up in box for between $25 and $45, I think you're in business there. It's a good price.
I would probably cap out a little earlier at say 30, 35. But here's the reason. You can't play this game alone.
Yeah, you do. You need a partner to play. It's no fun. This game was really divisive in terms of reviews. If you look at like all the classic magazines of the day, your EGMs, your Game Pros, you really had different scores within the actual magazine for it. Some people liked it. Some people didn't like it at all. And they bid accordingly. So you'll see a lot of review scores for this that are somewhere in the 6s or 5s, like an average score where it's on a scale of 10 here.
Right.
They don't quite get it. I think this is a game. I think both these games we did today are games where you can't just sit down and casually have a game and be like, it's no good. You really have to. Even the Mech game, and I was a little hard on it, but it requires some investment of time.
Yes.
To understand, because when I first played the practice, I was like, what's going on here? And part of it's the draw distance. It makes it hard to understand why you're not finishing, for example. Or, I didn't know I had to kill the towers, you had to grind them to the ground because you blow them up once, for example. I was confused, stuff like that. But both these require an investment of time. But I think to a certain degree, both are gratifying, and I think Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side is a very gratifying game. Very beautiful. Is it the most beautiful Sega CD game? Maybe. It's right up there.
Yeah, I think it probably is.
Is it the most
fun?
Feature laden and fun? I think it's a great game. And I think as far as fighting games go, you could do much worse than Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side.
As someone who absolutely hated the first one, I enjoy the second one. And with the existence of the second one at all, it makes the first one basically pointless. There's no reason to go back and play the first one instead of this one if you have both.
That I totally agree with.
Yeah.
So we found some common ground.
Some middle ground.
So we better quit while the iron's hot. Let's go ahead and head over. You know what time it is.
Oh, no.
It's time to spin the wheel and make the deal.
All right. Do you want to spin this week?
I don't know if I've ever spun the wheel.
That is why I'm wondering. Yeah, I can hold it here.
I'm not sure I've ever spun the wheel.
Here, I will let you spin.
Okay, so this week, what do we add this week, Brent?
This was the Apple II ad, right?
No, I think I put Neo Geo.
Oh, did you put Neo Geo Pocket in?
Neo Geo Pocket, which is I've actually owned a game for that, believe it or not. So
all right, give me a good spin here.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
I can't see what we got.
That's gonna be a.
That is the Neo Geo regular. Neo Geo.
Oh no, okay, we have a problem.
What?
We can't both play Turf Master.
That's true. So next week. I've been waiting for this episode. Now, boy, I wish I had a Neo Geo, right? But next week, we will be playing games selected from the vast library of the Neo Geo.
You know what? I think we should put one restriction on this.
All right.
Okay? You cannot play a fighting game.
I knew you were going to say that since I just picked one. That will... Yeah, okay, I'm down for that. I will pick something from the non-fighting game variety of Neo Geo. So, next week, we'll be playing selections from the Neo Geo, which has a rep for fighting games only, but there are plenty of good games that aren't fighting
games and Metal Slug.
Yeah, so any thoughts on the Neo Geo? Are you excited about that one?
You know what? I feel good about this one. I feel good. I'm gonna dig deep. I'm gonna find a hidden treasure.
Oh man,
I'm gonna do it.
Just like this week, huh?
Oh wait.
So, please join us next week for Neo Geo. And until next time, we'll
have a good one.